Just want to make sure you can see what I'm sharing as well.
Perfect. Yep, looks fabulous.
Okay, great. So good morning, everyone. Since we do these in small chunks, we're going to walk through a few compliance and mobility tools that you guys can use if you are using our Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite. So we'll make it quick. We'll show you some things around both end user experience and then admin perspective of creating these policies and configurations. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about what tools we're going to talk about today and what's available to you. Then we're going to go through some of the end user experience, what it looks like when you apply these compliance and data protection policies to your users. We're going to show you how to quickly implement these. These are not difficult things to do. They're very, very easy policies to create and manage. And then finally, we're going to go through a little bit of the report status and how you can determine what you've done is actually working and people are actually using the technology. So in terms of what's available, the Enterprise Mobility Suite has a bunch of tools in it, a bunch of capabilities. We're going to focus on 2 of those today, and we're going to focus on certain components of those. We may have follow-up sessions later to dig deeper into different aspects of that, but we're going to focus on Intune and app protection capabilities initially. And then finally, we're going to talk about some of the capabilities in Azure Active Directory around legal and compliance and terms of use configuration. So let's start with Azure Active Directory and one specific feature that we like to call terms of use. So terms of use is a policy that allows you to basically implement similar things that you've done in the past with logon banners. So in the right-hand side, you can see I'm browsing the My Apps portal to an application. And on this particular example, it happens to be Yammer. You could do this for all apps or certain SaaS applications you're looking for, but you can see that we've prompted the user during authentication to accept our corporate terms of use. So you could use this in a very flexible way to be able to say, hey, if you're using this from your home machine, we might have a different terms of use policy in terms of what you are capable of doing with our services. And with our other capabilities in Azure AD, you don't have to do this to people that are using services from corporate managed devices or devices that you trust. So you have a lot of flexibility on how you deploy this. The terms of acceptance and decline are also audited from a reporting and reporting purpose on the back end. So you can audit those, you can give legal reports of who's accepted and declined, etc. And then consent can expire. So we'll talk about that from an admin perspective towards the end. But consent can expire and you can have them reconsent on a regular basis if you choose. So here you can see on the back end some of the reporting that we have available around terms of use. So what's the date? What's the user that accepted it? Did they accept or decline the actual terms of use policy? So this is a way to take what you've been doing historically for years with logon banners and other things in Windows and apply it to any SaaS application that you integrate with Azure Active Directory, not just Office 365. So let's take a look at the next technology, and that's Intune App Protection. So on the right-hand side, you're going to see some animations or videos that are going to run. The one on the left is an Android device, and the one on the right is an Apple device. So both of these devices are installing Teams, right? And the point is that Teams came from the public store on those platforms. We did not push the app with an MDM provider. We let the user go ahead and install it from the public store, just like they would do any other application. But what you're going to notice is that on the Android device specifically, we're asking the user to install the Intune company portal so that we can do things like data encryption. We can do SSO to all the other SaaS applications that you might have on the device. And then on the right-hand side for the Apple device, you'll notice that we take it a step further and we install Outlook as well. So Outlook is going to also enforce some of those data protection policies around what I want to do with my data. So once we provision an email account here in Outlook, you're going to see it actually have a pop-up that says, hey, your organization's now protecting data in this application. Make sure you accept that to continue using the data. So on the Android device, right, we've gotten logged in, we've installed the company portal app, and then we're going to get into Teams here, and we can use Teams, all day long, just like we would on our corporate managed device. So the important part of this is that all of this is being driven with conditional access, right? And conditional access on the Android device, you can see, is actually enforcing that same terms of use policy. So it's not necessarily a browser play only. It enforces in full thick client apps as well as browser experiences. So you can see all of this work is being done on these devices at the application level. There's no requirement for you to enroll the device in Intune. You can do all of this within the application, whether the device is managed by any MDM platform. Third-party MDMs, this can run on top of. There's no problem actually using those in conjunction. So we'll talk a little bit more in depth about how those policies work around data protection, but the whole point here is that the user can install the app from the store. You as IT can then enforce governance policy on top of the applications, and then you're protecting and securing the data around those particular use cases. Okay, so let's dig in a little bit more on how app protection works. So app protection is more than just things like pins and biometric support, but what you're going to see here is app protection is enforcing an app pin in Outlook here. That's because the device doesn't have a device pin. So when you don't enroll a device, you might want to enforce an extra level of authentication to get into those what we call managed apps. And obviously we support biometrics and facial recognition on those types of platforms. But you're going to notice here I'm opening an Excel document, and I'm going to go and actually try to cut and copy some data out of it. So it's all well and good to enforce extra authentication restrictions on top of these apps, but I want to make sure the data doesn't move to a place where I can then not manage it or remove it in the event that I need to. So we'll take some data out of this spreadsheet. Then we're going to go back to Outlook, and we're going to potentially try to leak the data through a personal email account. So I'll go back to Outlook, and then I'll create a new message, and I'll use a personal account. So at the top, you notice I changed the sender over to a personal account. I'm just going to add some subject data here around leaking data, and then we'll try to copy the spreadsheet data into this message. So you can see right within the app, we're telling the user that you can't put organizational data into a personal account. They can go up, they can create a new message, which we're going to do. We can start with the corporate account. We'll try the same thing. It's going to let us paste the data this time, but then I might try to change the sender. So when I change the sender, right, we're not going to let them do it because they've already put corporate data into this message. So let's move on to kind of the next experience. Okay, people open up this file, and maybe I want to use some of the open in or share type of activities that are built into iOS. You can see that we're controlling that, and we're only letting them open that in what we would consider a managed application. And that managed application is essentially Word, Excel, PowerPoint in this particular instance. It could be a managed PDF viewer, etc. But the options are infinite. So once we're in the application, you notice that I'm going to try to save this to the local iPad, and you can see that it's grayed out. So we can also restrict where Save As functions have the ability to work, whether they go back to corporate workspaces or to other workspaces that we define. And then the next experience is around internet browsing. So we have an Edge browser both on Apple and Android platforms, and that is what we call our secure browser. This browser has the same manageability capabilities around automated data movement for sharing and opening and other functions, but it also enforces those same cut, copy, paste restrictions that we looked at within Excel. So I'm going to take this data from this secure browser session. I'm just going to go open up Notes on the iPad here. And then we'll create a new note and we'll try to paste the data into here and save it for other times where I might want to use it outside of my organization. So you can see they get the same experience they got within the Outlook app, nothing different. They're not able to save that data out of a corporate workspace. Okay, so let's move into what does this look like from an admin perspective, and how would you actually build something like this within your organization? So for that, we're going to look at a browser session. And we're going to take a first look at terms of use. So we talked a little bit about that in the beginning, but all of that is based in our conditional access layer in Azure Active Directory. So we'll go to terms of use, and you can see here, that's the policy that I was showing you that enforce those particular terms of use policies. You can easily go in and see reporting on who's accepted, who's declined those, but we're going to create a new terms just to show you what the capabilities are. So name, display name, you can upload a PDF of whatever the particular terms of use is. You can require people to expand the terms of use rather than just click accept and go on. You could have people accept it on each device that they're actually using to access your corporate data. And then finally, you can expire the consent. So I might want to expire the consent monthly potentially, or quarterly, biannually, however you want to do it, or even by number of days. So you have a choice on what you want to do there. And then finally, how do I deploy this? So this is going to be through conditional access policies. So you could apply this in conjunction with other access rules, or you could create your own policy at a later time that just deploys this to all the applications that you support. All right, so the next piece of what I showed you was application management policy. And for that, we're going to go and jump into Intune. So all of our app management policies are configured and deployed within Intune, and they're under our client apps and app protection policies. So we build these policies on a per platform basis. So you notice that I have an Android, an iOS device, and a Windows 10 policy. So we'll just go ahead and take a look at that iOS policy that was enforcing those restrictions on the iPad that I showed you. So the way you deploy this is you decide from an assignments perspective, and an assignments perspective is essentially a group of users. This could be all users, it could be a include or exclude type of activity. But the point is you can use existing groups within your Azure Active Directory, whether they come from on-prem Active Directory or they're created in the cloud, and you can deploy these policies out from down to one person to all users in your environment. So once you do that, you need to pick what apps are targeted. This is essentially a checkbox game, right? If you want something different for Outlook versus Teams, you could do that. But it's very common just to collect everything. That way you cover the basis for everyone that might install a particular app that's in the list. And then finally, you need to decide on the properties that you want to enforce. So we break these up into three types of enforcement policies. One is data protection, the other is access requirements, and then conditional launching. So data protection is all about what we showed you in terms of data movement. Open-in sharing filtering, backups to cloud services, cut, copy, paste control, encryption of data, syncing of contacts down to any app that supports contact syncing and printing. And this is the configuration where you would force into the policy managed browser, and that being Edge. So you don't have to do that initially. You could say, just let it open in the default browser, and then I'll add that as kind of a phase 2 approach to start controlling browsing. So the next piece is access requirements. So in the short video, we talked about application pins for all the managed apps on the device. This is where you can enforce that from numeric to passcodes, simple pin restrictions, the number of characters in the pin, and then enforcing different timeouts potentially for whatever the Touch ID and Face IDs might be occurring on those devices. You can force users to reset the pin after a number of days to a new pin. You can even enforce account credentials being their work credentials that they use. if you need to. And then there's recheck requirements around activity. And then the final thing that we do is around conditionally launching. So since these applications are not necessarily managed by an MDM platform, there's additional things that we may want to do. So the first thing that we do is we do in-app jailbreak and root detection. So you can decide if someone has jailbroken or rooted their device, what you want to do in terms of an action. So you can block, wipe data, whatever you choose to do. There's additional settings here around model restrictions and OS restrictions as well. But one thing I'll point out here is around PIN resets. So if a person, say, enters their PIN 5 times incorrectly, we're going to force them to reset the PIN. So reset requires them to put in their corporate credentials. They set a new different PIN, and then they're off and running and can use that from that point on. And then the final setting here is what we call offline grace period. So this can do many things in terms of blocking access, wiping data, but you might want to have a setting here for a period of time where if the app is inactive, like the person maybe gave the phone to their children or they got a new phone and it's just sitting in a drawer, Intune can automatically issue a wipe request for that application. In the event that it fires up at some point, we can automatically wipe the data off of it. Okay, once you deploy this, you're done. Now all you need to do is have your users log in, install the app on their device, and you saw in the beginning from the demo of how the app gets onto the device, how it gets managed, etc. And at that point, you're done. Now we do expose some auditing and logging capabilities around this. So there's much more in our Power BI dashboard for Intune, but we give you some very basic stuff here in the console around app protection status. So if you were to look at this, you'll notice that we break it down into number of users protected, number of policies, and number of apps protected. So you can drill into these and you can see what applications people are using when they've checked in and how much activity has been going on. So we'll go ahead and take a look at Teams here. We'll look on iOS. We'll look at Teams. So you'll notice that we don't have every application in that list available from a reporting perspective. The reason being is these are the applications that have checked in. If none of the other apps have checked in, then we don't create any type of data for them because there's no reason to do any type of reporting. So we'll just say, show me everything that's protected. You can see that Brian's been using it. And then we can drill into his activity individually. You can see he's not used any of these apps, but when we get to the bottom, we'll see the ones that he's using, what check-in times, when it occurred, etc. Now, the final thing that you might want to do is you may have the need to wipe the data from these applications. So you can come in and do what's called an app selective wipe. So an app selective wipe, these are some historical ones that have occurred, but I can create a new wipe request for any user that I choose. So we'll go ahead and put in my account. And then if the user has multiple devices like I do, we could either select all of them or we could select the one that we're interested in. And in this case, we're actually going to select both the Samsung and the iPad. So we'll go ahead and click that and we'll click create. So now what you'll notice is there's a bunch of new pending activities from a wipe request perspective. So what's going to happen now is the next time the app fires up and logs into the service, it's going to say, oh, there's a pending wipe request for this application. And in particular, Outlook, since it's a multi-user, multi-identity application, meaning that you can have multiple email accounts, multiple storage accounts in there. The only thing we do is we take off the corporate data from the Outlook app. So if the person has 5 or 6 other email accounts provisioned in there, we're going to leave those alone and we're just going to take the corporate data out. We don't uninstall the apps because we assume they may be using them under other circumstances and we don't want to impact the user in that way. You can come in, this status is historically available from a reporting perspective. These pending wipe requests will sit around for around 90 days. So you have plenty of time to catch those applications logging in and get rid of the data from them. All right, let's jump back to the slides. So that is a quick run around the bases of some of the compliance tools that we have available within EMS. There are many, many more, including things in Office 365 that you can take advantage of. But these are some of the top ones that our customers use in terms of protecting data, enforcing compliance specifically in the mobility space. So with that, I will hand it back to you, Brent, to finish off the discussion.
Awesome, thanks, Brian. Wow, so here's what's cool about what we just saw. So Brian and I have been at Microsoft for quite a while, and we're accustomed to getting in front of customers. And back, probably 2-3 years ago, we would show all these great bells and whistles around functionality that users get on mobile devices and in the browser. But it was a huge concern with our customers around, hey, how do we secure all of this? How do we make sure that we're protecting the data that people are accessing on those devices? And so what a great session, Brian. Last 30 minutes hopefully has really brought you up to speed with some of the capabilities, whether you want us from a Microsoft perspective to manage the device, or whether you want us to manage the app and the data within those apps. And so appreciate you walking us through that